Frightmare Weekend. Thank you for coming out to today's panel, Remembering Wes Craven. My name is Ken Hanley from Fangoria, and thank you so much for joining us today. I assume that Wes meant a lot to everybody in this room. His work is beyond influential, and he's really a guy who lost too soon. And but personally, I didn't know the guy, and so right now we're going to introduce some people who did know him very well, worked with him in some of our most iconic horror movies. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome to the stage Robert Englund. Wyss. Mitch Pileggi. And Miko Hughes. First of all, I would like to thank you all for participating today in this panel. And just to get started, could you each go down the line and talk about your first impression of Wes Craven?
Well, my first impression, I wanted a job. Back in the day, we sort of imagined Wes to be kind of like David Lynch. I was expecting this sort of gaunt, goth man dressed all in black. And because I'd been hanging out at a New Wave bar on La Brea in Hollywood. I had a crush on the little punk bartender, and they had a monitor on either end of the bar. And on one was a continuous loop of Eraserhead, and on the other was a continuous loop of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left in black and white. And after a couple of Irish whiskeys, it started to fuse together in my imagination. But I really respected Wes as an artist, and I went in on the interview. It was fitting in my schedule. I was doing TV then. And here's this, handsome, erudite man sitting head to toe Ralph Lauren, very preppy, pleated pinwheel corduroys, two-tone Oxford shoes. Not at all what I imagined, and a wonderful raconteur and storyteller. And he began to tell me his concept for Nightmare on Elm Street, and now I really wanted the part, And so that was my first impression. I just played staring games with Wes, tried to make myself shut up because I'm a motor mouth. And I got the part, and I either got it because Wes really liked me or because I have a skinny face and I can take a lot of foam latex.
I was like Robert. I thought I was going to come face to face with a man who, I was thinking more of a sleazier. I wasn't really a punk rock person, so I didn't think of the kind of punk rock black goth guy. I was thinking more of like a maybe overweight guy from the Midwest who had a really kind of dark sensibility, and I didn't think I would get along with him at all, and I probably didn't even think I'd ever get the part either. So I finally met him at the casting director's office, and he wasn't as preppy as Ralph Lauren. He was doctored in like a tie with a button-down Brooks Brothers like Oxford shirt. You're right about that. But I never found him too preppy. I mean, he always wore very formal clothing on the set. And he was so soft-spoken, I think I had to ask him to hype up there, And he was very quiet but always full of excellent descriptions of what he wanted exactly from me. And that's why we always got along really well. His language skills were superb.
I met him and I was like, well, you're not creepy at all. He's like a professor, he's a bird watcher. What do you mean you're a bird watcher? Like, no, we go out, there's many birds, there's a tremendous amount of birds in Washington. And he was just the coolest guy. I mean, I love him so much. And don't know. I mean, it's just the minute I met him, I felt.
Yeah, when I went in to read for him, I didn't know necessarily what to expect, but I found the most gentle, kind, very, very, very smart man who had such interesting things to say about what he was after, what the part meant psychologically. I mean, just so deep. And I later found out he was a nudist in the 70s. Which changed my whole opinion of but just the kindest, very intricate man.
Well, I met Wes in New York, and I expected to meet someone that would look like Rob Zombie. But Wes was not like that, as everyone has already said. I think he was wearing a button-down collar, and he was very soft-spoken, but in his soft-spokenness and gentility and gentleness and politeness was a very, very firm sensibility. And no BS, and I guess we can tell more details as the questions are asked, but I enjoyed meeting him very much and was very impressed with him on my first meeting. And like everyone else said, he wasn't what I expected at all.
Well, I met Wes during his latex period, so. No, I actually, when I went in to audition for Shocker, I had no idea that he was involved in the project. I walked into a room and the casting director said, "This is Wes Craven," and I was like, okay. And I was actually originally reading for a different role than Horace Pinker, and after my audition, I went home and they called and they said, "He wants you to come back and read for Horace." And I was like, all right. So I went back and I scared the shit out of Marianne Madalena, who was his partner, and that pretty much, she got up from the chair where she was sitting and kind of moved to the other side of the room. So that's a pretty good indication that I was doing something right. But Wes was an amazing man. He was a very gentle soul, and despite what he put on the screen. He had a great sense of humor. Sometimes it was a very corny sense of humor. When I was doing Shocker, he kept throwing lines at me. These one-liners where they're saying, "Wes, I can't say that." It'll be great. Okay, all right. Finger looking good. He was a great man, and we all miss him terribly.
When I first went to read for Nightmare on Elm Street, I was expecting somebody that looked like Rob Zombie. And so I thought Wes was the producer, and he was introduced as Wes, and I was like, that's so funny, they both have the same name. How weird. And she's like, no, he is the director. And I was like, what? I was like, wow, that's interesting. So he was really sweet. Everything everybody said, he's so smart and kind and really clear and erudite, and we were so young when we did that first movie, and he worked so well with the young sensibility, but didn't treat you like a child. I miss him and adore him.
I think Wes was the most professional director I've ever worked with. He listened more than pretty much anybody in the industry I can think of. His soft-spokenness and just his air about him just drew you in. And the first time I met him was auditioning, and we did the scene. It was good. And then afterwards, he wanted me to have a seizure, like freak out like I was possessed. And I started rolling around on the floor, drooling, screaming, crying. And it was just so simple in his reaction. Like, you could tell he didn't have to say much to convey that what he was feeling. He just drew you in, and just a complete class act. One of the best ever, for sure.
Awesome, great. Well, obviously the movies you guys worked with Wes, very FX heavy, lots of insane stuff going on. What kind of environment was it like on set working with Wes, and how did he handle you guys as actors?
Well, I don't know if Miko remembers this, but Wes did exploit that child. Wes took me aside during the filming of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. And I think we were shooting this scene with these albino eels, which Wes was using to look like snakes, serpents, and we were really behind schedule. And as Wes was corny. Wes's great pun that day was, if we don't get this shot, we're going to go on an eel penalty. which is for us actors, it's like the meal penalty. But the Teamsters have to have their hot meat. Wes had me surprise you on our tape, because he remembered.
Genuine.
Yeah, Miko didn't know I was there, and I came out of the furnace or something and grabbed Miko by the nuts for a second. Back to his trailer, and I had to do PlayStation with Miko for the next week to make it clear.
You got the take though, so it's worth it. I was only scarred substantially, but that's okay.
We worked at such a fever pitch when we did Nightmare 1. We had, I think, 18 or 20 days. It wasn't more than that. But so every day, I'd go to bed and I'd wake up in the morning not knowing what was happening, and Wes would always greet me and, all right, Heather, today we've made a large box that's going to have a bathtub at the top filled with water. There'll be a guy in a scuba diving suit underneath you. You'll be sitting on a 2x4. And then he'll reach his arm between your legs, and then we'll get that tape and move on. And I've been hearing this for the first time, and I just say, okay, Wes, whatever you want. I'd say like half the days were like that. Okay, we're going to be sliding down a slide today, and it's going to be, if everything was so physical, we were fighting, we're going to open up a pillow today. It's kind of irritating to your lungs, but just hold your breath. It was always like that, and Wes and I always say he was my torturer. Every day, he would bring me some kind of terrible, torturous effect or some kind of thing I had to, jump through fire, and I just, with the biggest smile I had, great, Wes, can't wait!
I remember him saying, more blood! Quite a bit. And he had a great sense of humor, and he'd say things like, I'd say, Wes, how was that? And he says, that was absolutely atrocious. Let's try again. And no, there's so many fun stories. He was like a father figure to me. At one point he came up to me and he was like, David, Courtney really likes you. You have to get your shit together. Make it work. She's a good girl. You guys love each other. So he's really instrumental. He's like, the real father figure. Just a great guy.
Yeah, I worked with him twice, many years apart, and after we did Scream, I later did Cursed with him, which was a bit of a nightmare, and he handled it with such grace, and it really just, proved in my mind the first one, he was always so polite and kind, and anytime he had anything to say to you, it was a little whisper that just changed your whole perspective on things, on the scene, on the character. And, he just had such a way about finding the truth of the scene. The second time, it was a little bigger budget and more of a fevered pace, and there were a lot of complications the whole time, but he just stayed so calm, and everybody else was flipping out and trying to figure out how to make it work and how to get the actors to not be drunk, and he was just a solid force the entire time. I miss him terribly. I wish he was still doing what he loved to do. Maybe he is.
Yeah, I can think of a few scenes, a few times. I can give you one example in the beginning, which I tried something that I thought was funny and very quickly learned about Wes, a couple of things. We rehearsed for a scene when Marge was holding a bottle of gin. And I like to rehearse with my props, and I like to do method work. And so I brought a real bottle of gin. And so we were rehearsing away, and I had a couple of drinks from the bottle, and then, because I thought it was funny, But Wes asked me, was it a real gin? And I said, well, yes. And well, Wes did not think it was funny. So I couldn't do that anymore, but that's one example. Another example is when we were doing the scene in the furnace where Marge takes the claws out and is talking to Heather, and telling the backstory, which just, came up on Yahoo, I guess, as a scene that was cut somewhat for recent distributions. And he cleared the set completely and had the set be absolutely quiet. I think there were some suits and maybe some completion bond people on the set. But anyway, he couldn't have been more respectful and more wonderful as a director to try to help me get to the place that I needed to get to make that scene meaningful. And at the end, when Robert grabbed me through the door, and I had to be, pulled through the door, for which I had to lose 150 pounds. No, you know that's not true. But because a dummy was pulled through the door, as you know, I'm sure you all know that, and it wasn't real glass, it was sugar, the window. And anyway, Wes told me afterwards that I was a good sport. And, he was always saying wonderful things. He thanked me for the hairdos that I changed throughout the shoot. We never discussed it. I just thought that maybe as Marge deteriorated, that her hair should also fall apart. And later he thanked me. And he was always thanking and complimenting and quietly. Just, But like I said, he was firm. So when I thought it was funny to have that bottle of gin in the rehearsal, no, it was not funny. And I do miss him, and it taught me, his passing taught me to call people before it's too late.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, no matter on all of the shows, they were always tough shoots. They were always very physical. There was always a lot of smoke, a lot of sweat, a lot of heat. We shot a lot of the stuff, a lot of the shocker stuff in a warehouse, and it was in the middle of the summer, and it was just brutally hot. And he made it, even though it was so uncomfortable physically, he just made it so much easier for us, to just get through the days. I remember when the first day I came to work on Shocker, they had been shooting for a couple of weeks, and Pinker had this limp, and so I had been working on this great limp. I was really proud of it. I was so excited. I got the set. I said, Wes, I got this great limp, man. I'm going to show it to you. And unfortunately, they had already shot because Pinker would jump into people's bodies, and this little girl was the first body that he jumped into, and she had established the limp. And he goes, you got a limp like her, and I go, really? But he made everything. I was fortunate to work with him on like four projects, and I worked on the last thing that he produced, A Girl in the Photographs. And I didn't know that he was as ill as he was, and we were kind of tweeting back and forth and texting, and I really wanted to. I was hoping that he was going to come up to the set, shot on Vancouver Island, and he didn't. And it was he passed, and it was white and didn't pick it up. But I was very sad that I didn't get to see him again. Yeah, I'll always miss him.
I'm just going to echo what most people up here have already said about on the set, the way he would quietly just say one or two words and shift your focus into his vision, and it always made such sense. And in playing the role I played in the movie, there was a lot of things with eels and worms and things, and Wes was always so optimistic. He'd be like, this is what's going to happen today. And this is so cool. And watch the Wrangler. Look, the eels are not biting him, and the worms aren't crawling. It was just very funny. And I was like, I don't know this Wrangler. I have no comfort from this. And he would just stay really calm, and he would explain it. And I like Heather, I was like, let's just do this thing. And in my death scene in the spinning room, and I got vertigo, and you know, Wes was getting a little frustrated with me because I could only go like inch by inch, and I was like, oh, I'm falling. And he'd be like over like his voice, because he never spoke loudly, he'd be like, you're on the floor. And then they would and I'm like, oh, he's getting so irritated. And then he finally, I know, and it was stressful because Wes could be intimidating and you did not want him irritated at you. And so finally he poked his head through this window and he started talking to me and he goes, oh man, I gotta get out of this room. And then he left, and then he stopped yelling at me. It was great.
Yeah, I remember the set was like family. Everybody, I mean, from what I hear, he worked with a lot of the same people, cast and crew, repeatedly, because when he found something that works, he stuck with it. And there was never really high tensions. I've been on sets where, you know, screaming, yelling, stress, over budget, over time. And there never really was any of that, at least from my experience with Wes. We finished on budget, on the day we said we were going to finish, which is really uncommon on a larger budget feature. And yeah, just his professionalism is something that will always stand out to me.
Great. A lot of you have worked with Wes multiple times. A lot of you guys are filmmakers in your own right. What would you say separated Wes from the rest of the world in terms of filmmakers and his style and, you know, just his interactions with you?
Well, I worked with Wes on 3 movies and a TV series, and by the time we got to the TV series, you know, it was the first time I'd ever worked. Wes is a double threat, writer and director. And Wes had the first laptop I'd ever seen on the set. And so if it didn't fit in your mouth, you didn't feel comfortable with dialogue, Wes would correct it right there on the set, which was great. But you know, I don't want us to be painting Wes as completely a saint. First of all, we've all been around the block. Wes had, without a doubt, the coolest bachelor pad in Hollywood. He had the old Steve McQueen bachelor pad on the ridge line, you know, up by Mulholland, and you know, he'd redone it in his own exquisite taste, but it was still, I mean, he wanted to be his wingman, you know. It was a pretty cool place. And I remember on the television series, and we've all had weeks, if not months, at the Sutton Place Inn up in Vancouver on various projects, and I was smart enough to get out of that hotel before I had to join AA. So I got my wife up there and my dog, and I got an apartment by Stanley Park up in Vancouver. And but I had the best apartment, so everybody was at my house when we wrapped every week. You know, and we'd watch Saturday Night Live and stuff, and have a couple of beers and some pizza. And it was me and Jack Holden and Wes one night watching Saturday Night Live. And there was a Dana Carvey sketch called Head Wound Harry. And Wes literally pissed his pants. He let me see him like that. This is my boss, my mentor, my Dr. Frankenstein. And he let me see him, you know, just giggling like a girl on this. And I realized, and I'd realized this before, and I think Heather and I talked about this a little bit, but Wes somehow managed to keep the 14-year-old boy alive in him somewhere with all of his smarts and all of his brilliance. The guy had the best record collection and the best book collection I've ever seen, and very diverse, this collection. A little bit of everything, but Wes he did have that 14-year-old boy alive in him, which I think, Mitch, accounts for those corny jokes.
Well, I feel privileged to work with Wes during the age of filmmaking, you know, not digital filmmaking, and so it's so different now. After a take, we can all go and huddle around the, you know, the video village and watch the takes again, and you can see what's good or bad. But in the days that, you know, I worked with Wes, it was all film, and so you know, you had to trust the director to tell you that you were okay and that everything was going to be okay. And when you're scared or acting in the scenes with Robert, it's so far-fetched. I mean, everything is fantasy, and I was really nervous often, like, am I looking really cheesy? I mean, is this going to fly, Wes? I mean, I just feel like I'm so over the top, or or sometimes he'd say, you're not giving it enough, and we'd have a little argument, like, I'm just being so big. He's like, you're not. So it's all this kind of shades of gray of what's going to sell and building to the end of the film where you're really crazy, and at the beginning you're just slightly crazy. And you're out of order, right? You're out of order, you're not doing it in sequence. So those facts made your trust in the director 10 times more than I feel I have to, put that faith in a director today. You can always kind of judge moment to moment how you're doing. But with the film, the next day I would ask if I might watch dailies, and he was always saying, come in, let's watch them together. So at lunchtime every day we watched dailies together, and I got so much respect for him immediately because the film was absolutely beautiful to watch. And it was on a huge, giant screen, which very few of us get to see the movie like that. And he would sit with the script supervisor and say, take number 1. I really liked that one. And he never asked me if I, agreed with his pick, but I always did. And I was always in the back, usually with my sandwich, eating. And he was so, he knew exactly what he wanted. We only did maybe 2 or 3 takes of everything. Nothing was more than that. And the movie's, a masterpiece.
I remember this one thing right before Scream came out, and I was really eager to see it. So I went to a test screening, like somebody gave me a thing about, would you like to see this movie Scream? And I was like, oh yes. So I go to Paramount Studios and I'm waiting in line, keeping my head down, and I get inside and Wes sees me, he's like, David, you can't be there. I said, but I won't fill out one of those cards, or maybe I can. But he's like, now sit back here with me. So I had the opportunity to sit next to him as he watched Scream. And every time one of the big scares would come up, he'd sit back and he'd go, scaring people. He'd sit there and then his other scream would come up. It was just the coolest. And then he was really supportive too. He put my brother in one of the films, and my father. I had an opportunity to work opposite my dad, which finally made it into Mad Magazine. So I'm sitting in Mad Magazine with my dad as a kid. That's like a thrill. But then I also directed my first film, and he was super supportive. He gave me a list of films to watch, and he talked to me about them, and he talked about shots, and he was just super supportive, like a professor through and through.
Yeah, I think much of what David just said, but he had a way of making you feel like you were so special and so gifted, and just gave you such confidence in what you were doing all the time. Even if you had a disagreement about interpretation of a scene or something, you still wound up leaving the conversation feeling like you were the shit. You knew what you were doing, and he was lucky to have you. And it's a real art. Not a lot of directors are like that. A lot of directors tend to wear you down a little bit, and he was always there to pick you up and prop you up, and just made you feel like $1 million every day.
Wes was an auteur by being a writer-director, and so whatever he made was his vision. And directors who are auteurs, who are good at what they do, are the ideal director for any actor. So in that way, I would say that it was a privilege to work with him, and easy to work with him, and not all the directors are that gifted. They just are not. So when you work with one who is gifted like Wes, then it's very special, and you feel it immediately. And you feel safe and inspired, and that you're part of something that's going to be good. I didn't have any way of knowing that we would all be sitting here when the film came out in 1984, and that we'd all be together now. But I'm glad we are, and it's because of Wes. He created this, and he was a great director. He could have done anything, and I don't know how or why the details of Wes's story. Robert and others here would know more about it than I do. But he created a world. He knew how to inhabit it. He knew how to make a movie that was in Nightmare 1 anyway, you know, that turned into a classic with very simple devices. You know, in the 70s we had them.
Yeah, he always surrounded himself with really good people, and so those people affected what we were doing. He was a great director. He directed you. I don't know about you guys, but I find a lot of directors that don't fucking direct.
They do. You wish they didn't.
Yeah, you wish they did. Yeah, but he knew what he wanted. He knew what he was doing, and he communicated. He was great in communicating that with you or to you, and as a result, I think his product was wonderful. But he wasn't just worried about the shot. I mean, and so many directors, I think, are just worried about what the shot was like. They don't care about the performances. Well, he cared about the performances. He cared about what we were doing, and he was amazing in how he communicated that to us. And so, as an actor, it was a delight and a true pleasure to be able to work with somebody who knew what they wanted and knew what they were doing, and he certainly did.
Steve and Mitch and Heather especially know when you're on a series, there comes a point when you know more about your character than any guest director will. And you know, I often think some of those guys don't even watch the show. You know, and they come in and you know, and
seriously,
and they don't know the show or the dynamic or who likes who or who doesn't like who, and they make you stand next to a character on the show that you don't like. But Wes was never like that. Wes was not, you know, the guest director. He was like the house. You know, he was the one that cared. You know, and it was really refreshing. You know, especially, you know, coming out of doing a lot of guest starring when you really feel lost. You're not, you know, you got to figure out the tone and you're not part of the family. And with Wes, you were always part of it.
At the risk of repeating a lot of what's already said, I think Wes's spectrum of talents is really what made him stand out. It's so impressive that I think a lot of mainstreamers might just see him as the horror guy or horror director, but he did so much. Like some directors specialize in certain areas, effects or working with actors, but Wes, from my understanding, started off in editing, did a lot of the editing himself.
Editing porn.
The fact that he was able to work with actors and get the performance that he wanted out of them in ways that a lot of other directors might fall short and pull off these complex effects in simple ways that practical effects are so underused and understated today. CGI is so easy, but it still doesn't work, in my opinion, 100%. The fact that he could bring that all together, I think is because he liked horror. That was his genre. He became the king, in my opinion, of that. But I think his talents could have been in any genre, in anything he wanted to pursue. He was absolutely one of the best.
And not to stroke any of us sitting here, but Wes really had an eye for talent too. The day is here. I mean, I'm talking about Johnny Depp. I'm talking about all the other, you know, extraordinary people that he found, you know, in the Scream franchise and down the line. You know, he redefined horror 3 times in the history of Hollywood. First with The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the Left, which was some dark shit. You know, yeah, and Wes liked to talk about Ingmar Bergman and all that, but it was some dark shit. Then The Nightmare on Elm Street, a completely original franchise, 8 movies. Built an entire studio on them. Then the Scream franchise, which is the meta, deconstructed horror franchise of all time. So he completely redefined horror in his too short life, 3 times, which is a major accomplishment, I think. No one talks about that.
Many of you knew Wes as a professional and personal. What would you say would be the moment where you saw Wes at his most Wes?
I think he was really at home on making movies. I think he was really, because I think Wes probably, he was very, very thoughtful. And I respect thoughtful people, but I always think they're suppressing a little bit. I tend to stream of conscious vomit my thoughts, because I got to get them out. I think that there might be a little bit of gold in there somewhere. Wes was very, very thoughtful, but I think that also meant that he was very contained. And I think having that family, on whatever project he was on, helped define.
I had the privilege of interviewing Wes for the documentary that I made called I Am Nancy, and I had met him for lunch and I told him my project, and he thought I was just ridiculous for making the film. First of all, he's like, everyone loves you, Heather. I'm like, no, it's not true. I said, everyone loves Robert, and I want to come at this movie from an idea. I'm like the ignored stepchild, and that's my point of view for my documentary. And he's like, well, I don't know if I want to participate in that. I'm like, well, please would you? And so of course he came to work. I made it, had him work for me one day, and he comes on time, and I go to actually where he's editing My Soul to Keep, and he was very busy, so he made an hour for me, and we start this very serious interview, and then he kept saying, Freddy Krueger. Break in the question, we would just start talking about Robert. I'm like, we can't talk about Robert or Freddy Krueger. So we tried, and it just went crazy, and he was constantly pulling my leg. And if you get to see the interview, it's on my documentary. He is the warmest, funniest, most hilarious goofball that exists. And like the 14-year-old just will come out with in him and just the drop of a hat, you just give him a chance. So he did such a service for me, and I'll treasure this interview. Probably, gosh, forever. It's really special.
Contrary to your paranoia, your image is bigger on the poster than mine.
That was the first one. Look at the name. That one on the DVD.
Well, Wes was really loyal, like his crew, he had had it for years, and he just really created his family and people that just loved him, that were super talented, worked with K&B forever. And I just remember one time on set, he was sitting there and he was watching all these like crazy Japanese animated like horror films, and excuse my graphics, there was one where like a lady's vagina like had these tentacles coming out. I'm like, Wes, what are you watching? Just getting some ideas.
The second time I worked with Wes, he had had open heart surgery. I had had open heart surgery many years prior. I had started building furniture not long after making Scream. He had started a few years after that building furniture. And we were both obsessed by the New York Times crossword puzzle. So we sat around and never talked about the film, never talked about characters, anything during the breaks. We would talk about table saws and bandsaws, and different woods, and last Sunday's Times, and how bad your chest hurt after they saw it. Just that was the Wes that I realized, was behind the filmmaker. This guy with an extraordinary amount of passions, from bird watching to everything I listed. So that's when I felt like I knew the true Wes, or another side of Wes. Because I agree, he really was very much himself on set. But there were all these, like I said earlier, he was just the most intricate person. So yeah, that was my experience.
I'm curious if anybody really knows or knew Wes at his most Wes, looking at him as a person that you would meet, that you might just encounter, and then looking at the body of his work and the sick, twisted shit he came up with. Who really knows?
It was so different.
Yeah.
He was just so opposed. He was big. He really was a big kid. And I remember one time I bought him he had just gotten a big screen television in the house you were talking about out there up Mulholland. And I bought him a Nintendo. And we used to play it, and he'd have so much fun doing it. And he left it on. He told me this later, and he left it on one time. I guess it burned an image in this brand new screen that he had bought. He wasn't happy about it. He said, "Why didn't you tell me that I'm not supposed to leave it on?" And I go, "Well, don't." Great, buy another one.
All right, well, we have time for one audience question.
All right, so there seems to be a theme between all you guys that you just trusted him, even when he would pitch crazy, weird stuff. Quite notoriously, both with Freddy's sweater and the Ghostface costume, it was not something that either studio were crazy about. They thought they looked really silly. I'm curious, for Robert and Ski, and even you, David, what your reactions the first time Wes showed you your, what is now iconic costume?
Well, it was in the script. It's described in the script, and I always thought when I saw the red and green that there must be some, because Wes is so smart, that he knew that there was some vibration of the colors that was disorienting, and that's why he chose the stripes, because the source material for Fred Krueger, gosh, I gotta be politically correct, the homeless gentleman that his brother saw out of the Venetian blind of their home, he was not wearing a sweater, Wes told me that, but he was wearing the fedora. And I have this horrible memory of being my last makeup test and the wardrobe fitting with Bob Shea, the head of New Line Cinnamon West, on a cigarette-burned futon in the old Desi Lou stage. And they had a box from Western Costume of hats, and they had lost faith in Wes's fedora. And this was the crux to me, because I love the reveal of the hat. I love that I could hide under the hat, that I could hide my eyes, that I could shade my eyes. And I was really, looking forward to working with the hat. And they had lost faith in it. They thought I was going to look like Indiana Jones. That's the first thing that Freddy Krueger brings to mind. So I had to fight for the fedora, which is Wes's original description of Fred Krueger in the script, and I had to fight for that. They had me in like paperboy caps. Read all about it, Springwood Slasher. Guys, this is bullshit. So I had to fight for that, but I don't remember any problem with the sweater. I think Wes explained that there was something disconcerting about the red and green stripes, and if you saw the millions of crayon drawings I get from children who are fascinated with that color scheme, they are just haunted by that. So I think Wes knew there was something psychological about that color mix. I don't know.
Van Gogh used it, in the pool room, in his pool room paintings at all. He used the red and green. Supposedly they are opposite colors in intention.
Oh yeah, there's something 3D about it.
Yeah. For a Scream, they didn't really have the mask. Like, we were getting close to shooting. They didn't have the mask. Wes was a music aficionado. He liked classical music, just all kinds of things, fine art. So he's walking through this crazy costume store, and it was in the back, under these things, and he found it, and it reminded him of the Scream painting. And he went up and he's like, "This is the mask." And I think the studio fought him a little bit, but it was just this iconic mask. But the great thing is, it was made by this one mask maker, and they buy the mask and they make this huge film about it, but they never got the rights to it. So this mask, this guy, his whole world changed and blew up. And now, if they put this Scream thing next to it, they can make money off it. But the original mask is just by this crazy, creepy, mask maker.
Well, just to wrap everything up here, is there anything else you guys would like to share about Wes? And is there anything you guys would like to say about Wes now that he's gone?
I I have a little something. It sounds self-serving, but when I went to meet Wes to get the part, Wes mentioned that he would like to have me, but that I was too young. And so I explained that I actually wasn't too young because Nancy was said to be 16, and I was whatever, 38 or whatever I was. And so I could have been to college and then got married, had my child, John Saxon and all that. And then Wes hired me. So I mean, that shows something right there, that you go to meet a director who thinks you're too young, and then you talk to him for 10 minutes, and he changes his mind and hires you.
Well, it's a cliche, you know, that we say and we lose friends in the business that they'll live forever with their work. But, you know, one of the great things about the new platforms that are available, whether it's cable or Netflix or whatever, these films will get discovered by a new generation. And we've all experienced that in our careers with this, that the more recent work we've done. We can, you know, David can go to an independent at Sundance that might not get a big distribution, but it gets discovered on cable or it gets discovered on DVD. It's found again, you know, and this happens over and over again. And I think that this will continue with Wes's films forever. So I mean, I think that he does live on.
And the stars that he created, Robert. Look at Robert's stardom.
Well, people forget, like, I mean, Sharon Stone. Wes found Sharon
Johnny
Stone.
Depp. That was
Yeah,
Johnny's
people
first
forget.
movie.
People know the
David
obvious ones, but they forget.
Langenkamp.
Yeah, people forget.
Meryl Streep. Oh, she might have been. When I first auditioned for Scream, I went in and they wanted me to play one of the kids. And I was like, I feel a little old for it. And then I read this part, Dewey, who was like this big, buff jock, like he's a football player, and that's not me. And I go in and I said, Wes, and I wanted to work on St. Gordy Cox. And I had a little thing going on. But I was like, Wes, I really think I could bring something else to Dewey. Like, he wouldn't just be the jock, he'd just be this insecure cop, which was hilarious to me. And he had the sort of foresight to like, you know what, that's really interesting, and sort of go with the flow and take a chance.
Well, thank you all for participating today.